Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rachel Patton, Executive Director of Preserve Arkansas. Preserve Arkansas is the statewide nonprofit advocate for historic preservation. Welcome to Women in Preservation, the series that features women who are working to save historic places. I want to begin by thanking our generous sponsor. This program is generously supported by DMX Architecture of Fayetteville. Many of you are already members of Preserve Arkansas, and we thank you for your support. If you're not already a member, I'd encourage you to join us for as little as $50 a year. Your membership provides vital support to our organization and allows us to continue our work of saving Arkansas's historic places. Come back next month and join us for a program on July the 11th by Melissa Roach, Project Administrator at Weatherproofing Technologies Incorporated. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Veronica Lilly. A native Arkansan, Veronica is a 1998 UALR graduate with a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management. Over the years, she has obtained several professional certificates, including the following: American Institute of Constructors, Associate Constructor; Construction Specifications Institute, Construction Documents Technologist; American Society for Healthcare Engineering, Healthcare Construction; American Society for Healthcare Engineering, Certified Healthcare Constructor; and Associated General Contractors of America, Certificate of Management, Lean Construction. She began her career in 1995 working for architects, general contractors, and state agencies in Central Arkansas. In 2006, she and her husband, Aaron Ruby, formed their first architecture firm, which they operated for 8 years and then took a short break. In 2018, they formed Revival Architecture, which they still operate today. In 2022, she applied for a contractor's license and formed Historic Works LLC, where she is majority owner and serves as president for the company. Veronica was fortunate to grow up next door to her grandparents. Her granddad was a carpenter and farmer, and she had an aunt who was an interior designer in Memphis. She was influenced by many people, but these two particularly guided her to her interest in the construction industry. Outside of work, Veronica loves to garden, play with her dogs and cats, and travel to the beach or a national park with her husband. Welcome, Veronica. Hello.
Hi, thanks, Rachel.
You're welcome. You're free to share your screen.
Share my screen and make sure I do this correctly. There we go.
Okay, it looks great.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rachel, and Preserve Arkansas for inviting me to speak today. This is a wonderful series and just really honored to be a part of it. It's Women in Preservation. Again, I'm Veronica Lilly, and I'm part of two small companies. One is Revival Architecture that is led by my husband, licensed architect Aaron Ruby. And then we have another small company, Historic Works. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in my presentation. Want to share a little bit about my background and how I got into construction and preservation, how my husband and I put our professions together to form our businesses, and offer some photos and glimpses of work that I've done in the past and some of the projects that we're working on today. Although I did not get my start in preservation, whoops, my clicker didn't work. Let me get that figured out. There we go. Didn't actually start in preservation. I did eventually come around to that. My construction and design interest did begin at an early age. My grandfather was a carpenter and a farmer, and we lived in Southeast Arkansas. One day he decided to build a small 2-room office out near his and my grandmother's home to conduct all of his miscellaneous side businesses. And that's a whole nother story. I was fascinated with every step of the process. So at the age of around 7 or 8, I had a front row seat to the building of this office building. The foundation framing, pouring of the concrete, the electrical rough-in, and the interior finish out. So I was basically just amazed. I had never seen any work like this before being done because, we lived out on a farm. That's what I saw every day, was farming. So construction was a breath of fresh air, and I was hooked. I wanted to be a part of that. So I suppose I started expressing an interest in building and the layout of rooms, how rooms flow, how they fit together. I remember sitting at the kitchen table at my grandmother's one day with my aunt from Memphis. She was an interior designer in Memphis. And she asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. And she was very surprised when I told her that I wanted to draw houses or draw buildings. So she asked me if I could draw a floor plan of my grandmother's house from memory. So I presented her with a rough sketch that was maybe about 90% accurate as far as how the rooms fit together, not to scale, of course. I really didn't understand scale and dimension at that point in time. I just knew I liked how the rooms fit together and how they flowed. So click the right button. Also, I lived near the Arkansas Post Park, and I visited there often. Spent many afternoons walking the grounds and visiting the museum. Unknowingly at the time, I know I was gaining an appreciation for the history of places, the history of buildings, and it made me question why none of the buildings were still out there where the museum is. I think it's mostly just the footings and some markers of where buildings were. I think they moved a lot of them up to the highway because they were worried the river might change course and wash them away. But anyway, that area really had an impact on me, I believe, just the history and everything. Education was another big part. I think many people find direction through education. And for me, that was definitely a guiding tool. I attended Northeast High School in North Little Rock, and they offered art, architecture, and mechanical drawing classes. And these were subjects I was definitely interested in. So I took all of those just to gain knowledge and experience and how all of that worked. I attended my first year of college at U of A Fayetteville in the architecture program. But I quickly discovered sitting and drawing every day was not exactly what I wanted to do. Thank goodness I found the construction management program at UALR. And that was definitely more the direction I wanted my career to go. Of course, this was the mid-90s, and there weren't many women in construction or in management positions. So that presented a little bit of a challenge. I think when I was at UALR, there were maybe only 2 or 3 women in the construction classes, whereas today there are many women in those programs and many women in construction at various levels and in management positions. So I'm glad to see that. One more check mark there for the gals. A lot of people have asked me, was it tough to get into this field at that time? And I would have to say yes. Sometimes it did feel challenging. Like I said, it was in the 90s, and occasionally there would be a little opposition, maybe from some of the older male population. But I was determined to do my job and do it well. So I just, let my skin thicken up a little bit and kept my head up and kept plugging along. I started my professional career really working with WD&D architects in Little Rock while I was attending UALR. And I graduated while working for CDI contractors. There I became a project manager and co-manager of the expediting department, helping train new employees. And while I was at CDI, I focused mostly on new construction and renovation projects. My first project when I worked there was the Arkansas State Police headquarters out on I-30. This was a really big learning opportunity for me at the time. So I was stationed on site as project expediter. So this was the old Southwest Mall that was gutted and finished out in the trooper blue tiles. The systems in the building were a first for me as well. There were a lot of high security areas and a lot of things that this was my first experience working with. So, for instance, there was the RF shielding of the communication room. It was really interesting to see how the copper mesh was fully wrapped around the room, how it worked to shield the electromagnetic interference, radio frequency interference. Again, there was a lot of high security areas in this building. Another first for me was just the other forms of security that they had between the sections of the building. There were palm readers and badge scanners and everything. Remember, this was the mid-90s, so all of this seemed like this was new technology back then to me, and the first time I had had any experience with it. So it seemed pretty high tech. The project was also featured in the Construction News magazine. Sorry for the blurriness there. These are some old photo clips I kind of pulled together. Construction News from December 1996, and I was interviewed for that article. So that was pretty exciting. Also got to work on building of the Little Rock Chamber of Commerce downtown on Markham. This was really my first kind of pushing me into more project management. I got to do most of the project management on this project. And it was it was designed by Puck Stanley. I do remember that. And it was a good opportunity to work with a really good architecture firm in town. And that was a real benefit later on, because not long after that, in 2001, the 9/11 attacks occurred, and a lot of investors pulled out of some many projects, really. And CDI had a pretty big company-wide layoff. And so in 2002, I went to work for Polk Stanley and became the local architectural rep on the Clinton Library for a little over a year as that came out of the ground. That was a lot of fun. Another very interesting project. I still have my hard hat, had my name taped on the front of it. Again, some old blurry photos I had to dig through the archives to find. Oh yeah, I got to meet Bill Clinton while I was there on site. That was a really interesting project. Enjoyed that. Another question I've been asked before was, what's my favorite part about working in construction? I would say the first thing would be the various materials that are used. And second would be probably the differences with each new project. No two projects are the same, even though you do a lot of the same steps and procedures, paperwork and whatnot for each project. They are all different because every building is different. So I like those aspects. And those are also two categories I like best about preservation work as well. So I lucked out and I married an architect. We designed our home and moved in on our first anniversary, and we did most of the interior finishing ourselves. And I love to work with my hands. It doesn't matter if I'm cooking or gardening or painting or building or whatever it is. I love to work with my hands. So that's probably my third favorite thing about any type of construction type work. So here it shows kitchen tile. There's a glass and stone backsplash that I put up in my kitchen. And I did all the prep work and grouted in the tile and brought the electrical outlets out flush, so everything worked and looked nice when I was finished. I laid a sidewalk around the front of our home. We had a patio done in the back by a crew, and we had a lot of leftover stone. So we laid out this sidewalk in the front. Aaron helped with mixing the concrete base, and I did all the laid out all the pieces and did the mortar and placed each piece by hand. I also believe in recycle, reuse, and repurpose. I hate to throw anything away unless it's just really outlived its purpose, or at least try to recycle things. So I had this old black metal bench that I didn't use anymore, or it was just, we didn't use it. It was just kind of left over in the shadows. So I pulled it out, cleaned it up, painted it, gave it a fresh, bright, cheery look, and placed that over in front of my garden. And it gets used a lot more now. And then I had what was new at one point, wooden bar out by the pool. And it again had kind of worn through the years and needed to be freshened up. So a few nuts and bolts to help hold it together and a fresh coat of paint gave it new life. And that's just some of the fun things I like working on in my spare time. Let's see. So after acquiring his architect's license, my husband wanted to start his own firm. So in 2006, we started Ruby Architects, specializing in historic preservation, combining the experience we had each gained, him and his design background and me with project management. We felt like we had a pretty good shot at forming our own company. So we did this, and this was really kind of my first introduction into preservation type work. So one of the early projects I remember we worked on was the Johnny Cash Boyhood Home in Dias. And I like to show the before and after pictures because you really get a sense of what had to be done to take this sad, rundown home and restore it back to what it looked like when the Cashes lived there and Johnny was a young boy. So this was a lot of fun. So it was in pretty bad shape when Arkansas State University took possession. It was a huge team effort to bring this little house back to life and have a lot of the original items brought back into it. For one of the first things we were involved with was just stabilization, having the house lifted and moved and providing a better foundation and support for it. So it would last for many, many years. One of the other fun things we worked on were the shingles. Once the old roof was removed, some of the old original shingles were down under all the layers, and it had this odd green color, these odd green shingles. So one of the challenges we had, and there was a lot of research put into this, was how do we match that green? So that was fun. We got to do that, match the green. It now has a nice green roof on it. Let's see, what was next? We did a lot of other projects in Dias. One of those was the administration building, lovely old building. First thing we did was get a new roof on it. Any of you working in preservation know that usually that is the first thing you have to do is get a new roof. But this was finished out and became museum exhibit space and offices. So that was a lot of fun to work on too. It's kind of the same for the Tushek building in Lake Village. It was a 1906 historic building that had been abandoned and was just full of trash. It was in really bad shape. It needed a new roof. That was one of the first things to be done. And the city wanted to bring all their municipal offices into one location instead of being scattered out all around town. So we brought in they wanted to put the police department, the water department, the mayor's office, and I can't remember what all other offices they brought into it, but it did consolidate that. And so people didn't have to travel so far around town to pay their bills or um, do any of their city business they needed to do. So in this, very important use of materials for this project because it was LEED certified. So one of the main focuses was preventing any construction debris from going to the landfill. So there was very, very little material that actually ended up in the landfill. Materials, again, anything that was sustainable, renewable, cork flooring there in the entry that you can see in the right photo, period light fixtures, and the deep set awning. The original building, we found photos that showed an awning. This one goes up a little higher and is a little deeper to help keep those first floor windows cool and let as much natural light in as possible to the space. Let's see. So there's the outside. Again, tried to go with the period light fixtures, and then some of the items that we reused instead of doing away with were some of the old wood doors. Those were hung on the walls as artwork going up the staircase to the second floor. And of course, they needed office space and conference room. And so all of that was worked into the building with as many modern features as we could to make it usable and serviceable for the city and still maintain as much of the original design and detail of the building as we could. Taking old buildings that are dirty and dusty and forgotten about might not seem appealing to some people, but to me, that's kind of what makes this job worthwhile. I like to see, especially the final result of that, and seeing the owner's faces when a project is complete. That's definitely rewarding. So in 2014, I don't know if any of you have ever worked with your spouse before, but sometimes that can get a little difficult. So we decided we needed to take a break from that. So I ended up going to work for UAMS for a couple of years and learned the healthcare side of construction. And that was very interesting. And after that, I was with Baldwin and Shell for nearly 2 years and worked mostly on some renovation and new construction projects there. And then around 2018, we regrouped, my husband and I regrouped and formed Revival Architecture. Still focusing on historic rehabilitation, restoration, and preservation being our main focus. So while I was working in the architecture firms, my main tasks were more, I guess, running the business side of things. But I also worked on submitting RFQ responses for work and assembling specifications for projects, reviewing project submittals, and writing contracts, as well as helping with materials for interiors and color finishes and that sort of thing. As a business owner, you find out quickly that you have to do everything. Whereas Erin does the drawing and a lot of other business aspects too. I was handling invoicing and paying the bills, taking out the trash, pretty much anything that needed to be done, and still do all that today. Here on this screen are some shots of the Woolsey family farmstead in Fayetteville. There's an old watercolor rendering and a shot of the new fireplace that was built, chimney, and the wood has started to weather just a little, which is giving it a little more historic look. Hopefully this will be finished and not too much longer, maybe this year, maybe next year. And it'll be a great place to go visit and see. And it's coming along. It's very beautiful inside. So one of the other things that, one of the main jobs that we've really been involved with since forming Revival is the Mississippi County Courthouse. Did a renovation in addition to that. And so here's a little before shot. They were still using air conditioning units. And there was a lot of moisture damage in the building. They had plaster falling from the ceilings and falling off the walls, and just a lot of issues, and it needed a lot of work. The roof was leaking really bad. That was part of the moisture problem. So that was one of the first things we did was got the roof replaced and took care of those issues. And then the construction began for the renovation and addition. So this was built, I think around, they started it maybe in 1919, the original courthouse. And then the renovation and addition was completed in the fall of 2022. So it's over 100 years old, and it was just a really neat job to work on. So again, you know, we have this wonderful historic building. It was in desperate needs of repairs and updating. One of the neat things was this marble, the old main entryway. They don't use it now as the main entry, but it was the main entrance. So all that marble was cleaned, the floor, walls, and that grand stair was just really amazing. The light fixtures were refurbished and improved on, so they give out a little more light than they used to. And the paint and everything, it's a beautiful space. One of the exterior doors used to have a copper and glass canopy over it, and we found old postcards and images that showed that. And so the left photo there shows where we had that replicated for a new copper and glass canopy over those doors. The historic courtroom, the main courtroom in the original courthouse, received a lot of work. It got this period chandelier and the trompe l'oeil finish that's on the walls and the ceiling, and it's just a really beautiful space now. Let me get a sip of water. So along with renovating the historic portion, we doubled the space, doubled the size of the courthouse by adding an addition. So in the addition, we added ADA bathrooms, new elevators, and an open steel staircase and exposed steel beams, which point to the county and state's steel production there in Mississippi County. The new courtroom in the addition uses a lot of natural wood tones with acoustic ceiling, acoustic plaster on the ceiling, and court flooring. Again, use of some really neat materials, durability and sound effect. And it's a big room, but you don't get that echo. All of those materials worked like they are supposed to and made it a really nice space. And of course, the exterior, the grounds of the courthouse received a big facelift as well. There's a new plaza, additional parking, nice landscaping that really makes it a more inviting place when you have to go to a courthouse. And even just to walk through and just to kind of hang out on some of the little park benches. It's just a really pretty area now. There is a dedicated it's called a sally port on this side of the building, the dedicated entrance for detainees when they are being taken in from the county jail into the courthouse for court proceedings. And so everything now has been made much safer for public and for the judges and the lawyers and for the detainees. So everything is separate. Everybody has their own dedicated elevator, waiting areas. And so it's improved, the sign of our times, I guess. We have to implement these new features into our public buildings. Let's see. So an additional service we did for Mississippi County on the courthouse project was artwork. That's another thing I like to do, is photography. And so we hired a professional photographer who went through Mississippi County and took photos of a lot of important, other important buildings and sites and landmarks. And we have those framed and hung. And these are some of my photos that I took and framed for the courthouse. The museum there in Blytheville allowed me to come in and photograph some of the artifacts and some of the other memorabilia that were there in the museum and use those as photos in the courthouse. And the lower right-hand photo there is of a painting that I commissioned a local artist here in Little Rock to paint. And I think it's based off of a maybe 1929 postcard of the original historic courthouse when it was still newer. And it's so interesting because you can see the trees are much smaller than they are today. And it was just a really, really neat project to work on. Another project that for a private client that we did, or are still working on part of it, helped us make a decision to start a new company. So we had some clients who wanted us to be a little more involved in the coordination and monitoring of the construction side of delicate historic type projects. So we thought about it and wanted to keep that work separate from the design firm. So we started Historic Works. So early in 22, I took the exam and obtained my contractor's license and formed Historic Works, providing construction management and consulting for historic buildings and properties. This has been fun for me so far. We've kept it small and manageable. And I like working closely with clients on specialized projects. So in 2022, we started out with just some small projects, worked at the Lone Oak Train Depot. They needed just some cosmetic repairs on the inside and a couple of things on the outside. There was a roof leak, and so we had that replaced and improved the copper trim that was there, and just kind of fixed some things that were not working properly. Interior, there was some plaster damage and some rotten wood, and just matching the profile of the original trim and replacing plaster that had fallen off the wall and areas that were stained or miscolored. Just improved that and kind of cosmetically just made it look better and fixed up. Done a few little projects for Historic Arkansas Museum. The well that sets out, I can't remember the name of the building that sits next to, it was starting to decay and the wood wasn't holding up very well. So we had that rebuilt and freshly painted, working on a gate that was damaged and had some rotten wood, having that right in the middle of working on that right now. And then I think the brick steps, we added those, they go down in the root cellar under the smokehouse. So just a few things, just to kind of help out and get our feet wet in lots of different areas with a lot of historic properties. Let's see. So one of the bigger projects that Historic Works has been working on is this cabin out in the woods. It's on the Wingmead property, just outside of Stuttgart and Rowe, Arkansas. It is a historic log structure, and it is on the historic register. There's no electricity and no plumbing out there. It is very, very rustic. This is a privately funded project, and it was in pretty bad shape when we first visited. The inside was extremely dirty, and we had to wear face masks and gloves and goggles just to go in and clean it out. There's an old photo of what it looked like when it still had furnishings in it, and that's what we are kind of headed back towards, getting it back restored to that point. A lot of the wood outside had rotted, steps and porch boards weren't safe in all areas to walk on. A lot of the window panes were cracked, some broken out. And there was a lot of insect damage, carpenter bees, ants, and rodent damage. A lot of squirrel places where squirrels had chewed their way through, a lot of doors and screens and around the fireplace, and just a lot of damage here and there, as well as the roof is in pretty bad shape and needs to be replaced as well. So a lot of what we have done so far, and some of this has been subbed out to professionals who do this for a living. All of the windows were removed, and broken panes were replaced. All the windows were reglazed and repainted and rehung. We went through and painstakingly removed all the hardware in the cabin, all the windows and the doors. Most of it was rusted and not even working properly anymore. So we had to take all of that off and send it off to be refurbished. So here's Bailey painting, helping on one of the windows there on the outside. And again, I love to paint, so I got to do a lot of painting here. All of the exterior trim, interior trim. On the right, I think I'm painting the new interior screen shutters that are going up, and using some really nice heavy duty copper screen in those. That was a lot of fun. I say that I'm ready to take a break from painting right now. Let's see. So yeah, there's all our hardware that was fixed up for us. And some of the doors were in pretty bad shape. I think most of them were salvaged. Maybe there was one door that was replaced completely. I can't remember if it was complete or just partial. But here's one shown in this photo. So the stile to the upper part over there had to be replaced. And we decided to use Spanish cedar in hopes that that would last longer and handle the moisture that's out there. And then on the lower corner of the door, you can see the white patch. That's Abitron. So that's a great material. It's not too expensive that you can use to patch wooden items, and it'll harden and you can sand it and paint it and never know it was there. So this door has been painted since the repair work, and it looks just good as new, really. Let's see, what else have we done on this? So there were a lot of porch boards replaced and a lot of exterior logs replaced. The foundation logs were mostly rotten, so those were all replaced. And we added a French drain system. So this fresh gravel is covering that. And the owners agreed that would be a good thing to add to just, longevity for the building, and hopefully keep those bottom foundation logs from rotting again for a long time anyway. So the steps were replaced. The photo on the right, this is the new steps and handrails, which were made from, and I think it was an oak tree. It was very near the cabin, and it needed to come down. So we have that removed and milled and used it to build this set of steps. And those turned out so nice. The owner decided they wanted steps down the other end of the porch as well. So the left photo there is one of the guys that was working out there. He's digging a footing for adding another set of stairs off the other end of the porch. And let's see. And there is the National Register of Historic Places plaque there next to one of the doors that's been repainted. And that's our crew there on the right-hand side. That's Erin and myself and Bailey. She's our intern with Revival. I think that's all I have for today. So if there's any questions, I'll be glad to take questions.
Thank you, Veronica. I will check real quick. I don't see any questions yet. Although I'd encourage anyone to type your questions in the chat or the Q&A if you have them for Veronica. We have plenty of time. And Veronica, I've got a couple questions for you in the meantime, whenever you're ready.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Okay, your video is off.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, there, okay.
Okay, now I can see you. Okay.
I guess I meant to stop sharing screen. That's what I was doing.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I clicked the wrong button. There we go.
That's okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So looking back on your career, well, just watching that PowerPoint, there's several projects that you talked about that I absolutely love. I'm a big fan of the stuff that y'all have done at Revival that you mentioned, but is there something, one project or two that stands out as being your favorite? If you think back.
After I had finished kind of assembling the PowerPoint, there was one project that I wish I had gone back and added to it, and that was the Woodruff Print Shop downtown with Historic Arkansas Museum. We worked on that when we had Ruby Architects, and talking about materials and just the love of materials and how that was rebuilt. Of course, it was accidentally torn down, maybe I think back in the 40s. And when they decided to rebuild it, it was rebuilt using period methods. There were no, I want to say mechanized means used. There may have been a little, but most everything there, the nails were made by the blacksmith. The paints were hand mixed. The wood was reclaimed and hand hewn. It wasn't milled at a lumber yard. These were hand done, down to the little boot scraper out at the steps that goes in off of off of 2nd Street, maybe. And the metal railing, it was set in lead. They didn't have epoxy or modern concrete and mortar like we do now. And so he chiseled a hole in that limestone step and poured lead in there to anchor the metal railing going up the steps. So just little details like that were implemented. That probably was one of my favorite projects, mostly because of all the unique materials and that it was all hand done. It took a long time to do it, but it was worth it, and it's still a really cool building to visit.
Yes, I agree. It is. And anyone who's not familiar with the Woodruff Print Shop, you can visit it at Historic Arkansas Museum in downtown Little Rock. Okay, Lily McRae says really beautiful and unique projects. Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
And Gigi Wertlack and Lona, fabulous information. Loved seeing all of your transformations. Thank you. And so, no questions yet. I have more.
Okay.
What are things that we or others could do to encourage more women to get into construction?
Oh, that is a good question. Well, for me, definitely having the education to back up my interest. It all started with having an interest in it, but having the education to back that up definitely made me feel a little more qualified to venture out and do like what I'm doing now. I would have never, I guess, been down the road I've been. I wouldn't have ended up here without first having the interest in it and getting the education to support it. And that just really started the road on gaining the experience that I have now.
Thank you. And you talked about some things that you enjoy doing as hobbies and as parts of your work. Is there anything else that you didn't already mention, like anything that you just like about your job that you didn't already talk about?
Yeah, I mean, just since I've started working with Erin in preservation type work. Anytime we travel, part of the time we usually spend looking for the historic downtowns of places just to see what's been saved in those historic areas. Sometimes we find buildings that are in really bad shape that we go, oh, we'd love to work on that and fix it up. And sometimes we're in areas where they have done the renovations already. And it's just really nice to see that some towns do make the effort to save their older structures, breathe new life into them and give them new purpose. And that's one of the things that the Mississippi County Courthouse in Blytheville, one of the things we were glad to work on that is, it's 100 years old. And we're certain that with what's been done to it, it'll be there in 100 years, just to continue to serve the community, serve the public. And yeah, that's just to breathe new life into the old buildings.
Absolutely. People that have done it successfully, and then so many opportunities for other places
Yes.
to do it too. Okay. A question, is there a diversity element in historic preservation in Arkansas?
Oh, is that for me?
Yes, I guess so, but I can.
Is there a diversity?
Elizabeth, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but I will say yes, there is growing diversity in historic preservation in Arkansas as far as who is involved in preservation, age, gender, race, all the above, as well as the type of sites that people are preserving, and that are, people are putting a priority on preserving these sites that tell the stories of underrepresented communities, if that's what you're asking. And then Vanessa McEwen has a comment, love seeing your work and hearing your story. Thanks for all you do, Veronica.
Thank you.
And Elizabeth said, yes, that's exciting. Thank you. That's what she was asking. Okay.
I was afraid I would talk too fast. I tried not to, but.
You're great. You did perfect on time.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you again for an excellent program. I really appreciate you taking time to speak with us today, and I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you, Rachel. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.